I never imagined I'd become the protagonist in one of those infamous Neighbor from Hell stories. But here I am, Ethan Carter, a 36-year-old software engineer, recounting the bizarre and infuriating saga that unfolded after I moved into my dream home in the picturesque neighborhood of Oak Ridge Estates. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet, friendly community with tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, and a sense of camaraderie among the residents. But little did I know, my peaceful suburban life would soon be upended by one woman, Margaret Whitaker, the self-appointed dictator of our homeowners association, HOA. Oak Ridge Estates was everything I had ever wanted in a neighborhood. Nestled on the outskirts of the city, it offered the perfect blend of tranquility and convenience. The houses were spacious, the streets were clean, and the neighbors seemed friendly enough. I had spent years saving up for my first home, and when I finally closed the deal on a charming two-story house with a cozy front porch, I felt like I had made it. The house came with a few custom touches, including a navy blue mailbox with brass accents mounted on a sturdy wooden post. It wasn't extravagant, just a simple, tasteful addition that gave the property a bit of personality. I liked it. It felt like a small reflection of me. For the first 2 months, everything was perfect. I settled into my new routine, working from home during the week and spending weekends exploring the neighborhood. I even started to get to know some of my neighbors, a retired couple next door, a young family across the street, and a few others who waved hello during their evening walks. But then, the letters started arriving. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when I found the first notice in my mailbox. The envelope was stamped with the official Oak Ridge Estates HOA logo, and inside was a neatly typed letter informing me that my mailbox was non-compliant with the community's standards. According to the HOA bylaws, all mailboxes had to be the standard black metal variety. My custom navy blue mailbox, it seemed, was a violation. The letter was signed by Margaret Whitaker, the HOA president, and included a handwritten note at the bottom. Please remedy this issue within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in fines. I rolled my eyes and set the letter aside. I had more pressing matters to deal with, like fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen and repainting the guest bedroom. The mailbox worked just fine, and I wasn't about to drop everything to replace it because of some arbitrary rule. 30 days came and went, and I had all but forgotten about the HOA notice. That is, until another letter arrived. This one included a $50 fine for my continued noncompliance. A week later, another fine arrived, and then another. By the fourth letter, I was starting to get annoyed. I had every intention of replacing the mailbox eventually, but the constant stream of fines felt excessive. Still, I wasn't about to let Margaret Whitaker dictate my life. I decided to ignore the letters and focus on more important things. That was my first mistake. One Saturday morning, as I was working by my front window, I spotted Margaret marching up my driveway with 2 men in tow. One carried a standard black mailbox, and the other had a shovel and a bag of cement. My stomach dropped. I rushed outside, still in my slippers, to confront her. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Margaret turned to me with a smug smile. "Since you've failed to comply despite multiple notices, the board has voted to remedy the situation ourselves. Section 12.2 of the bylaws gives us this authority. You'll be billed for the materials and labor, of course, in addition to your outstanding fines." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "You can't just remove my property without my permission. That's not legal." She laughed dismissively. "Actually, I can. You agreed to the HOA rules when you purchased this home. After 45 days of noncompliance, we can take corrective action. You should have read the documentation more carefully." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "I'm documenting this in case there's any confusion later." Margaret's smile faltered. "Put that away. You don't have my permission to film me. We're on my property, and I'm documenting what I believe is a legal activity. I don't need your permission." The workers exchanged uneasy glances. I decided to try a different approach. "Guys, I understand you're just doing your job, but removing my mailbox without consent could get you in trouble too. I'm not angry with you, but I am going to report this." The older worker straightened up. "Ma'am, maybe we should come back another time if he's going to make this a legal issue." While they argued, I quickly searched tampering with mailbox federal offense on my phone. What I found made me smile. "Margaret," I said, turning my phone screen toward her, "did you know that mailboxes are considered federal property?" Damaging or removing them without authorization is actually a federal offense under United States Code Title 18, Section 1725. It can result in fines up to $250,000 or up to 3 years in prison. She scoffed. That's ridiculous. That law is about mail theft, not HOA compliance. You can't make up legal nonsense to avoid following the rules. I'm not making anything up. Feel free to read it yourself, or we can call the postal inspector right now and ask them directly. For the first time, Margaret looked uncertain. The workers exchanged glances, and the older one put down his shovel. Ma'am, I don't want any part of federal charges. Margaret sputtered. The HOA has authority over all exterior fixtures. The HOA may have rules about appearance, I explained calmly, but they don't supersede federal law. You can fine me, but you cannot legally remove or damage the mailbox yourself. The workers started packing up their tools. Margaret's face turned an alarming shade of red. This isn't over. The board will be discussing your continued defiance and all legal options available to us. With that, she stormed back to her pristine white SUV. That evening, I ordered a standard black mailbox online, not because I was giving in, but because I wanted to defuse the situation. However, I decided to wait a few days before installing it. I was right to be cautious. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of metal being wrenched from wood. I rushed to my window just in time to see Margaret yanking my blue mailbox off its post with a crowbar. It was 6:15 in the morning, and she was dressed in dark clothes, like some kind of mailbox ninja. I grabbed my phone and ran outside in my pajamas. What the hell do you think you're doing? I shouted, immediately recording. Margaret froze, clearly not expecting to be caught. Then she straightened up, crowbar still in hand. Enforcing the rules, she said defiantly, though I could see panic in her eyes. My blue mailbox lay on the ground, dented and scratched. I literally just told you this is a federal offense, I said, keeping my phone pointed at her. And now I have video evidence of you deliberately damaging federal property. A few neighbors had emerged from their homes, curious about the commotion. Mr. Thompson from across the street stood on his porch in his bathrobe, mouth agape. The Johnsons next door had paused their morning dog walk to stare. Margaret suddenly realized she had an audience. She dropped the crowbar and attempted to regain her composure. The HOA has the right. No, it doesn't, I interrupted firmly. What you're doing is illegal, and you know it. That's why you're here at 6:15 dressed in black instead of coming during business hours with your clipboard. More neighbors were gathering now. I could hear murmurs and see people pointing. Margaret's confidence was visibly crumbling. This non-compliant mailbox has been an issue for months, she announced loudly, trying to justify herself to the onlookers. As HOA president, it's my responsibility to maintain community standards. My next-door neighbor, Dave, a retired attorney, approached us. Margaret, did you really just destroy this man's mailbox? I didn't destroy it, she insisted. I'm removing it for replacement with an approved model. Dave shook his head. That's not how this works. The HOA can fine him, take him to court, or place a lien on his property after due process. You can't just vandalize his property. It's worse than that, I added. Mailboxes are protected by federal law. Tampering with them is a federal offense. Dave nodded. He's right about that. I've seen cases like this before. Margaret's face paled. She looked from Dave to me, then at the damaged mailbox. This is ridiculous. I'm acting on behalf of the HOA board. Did the board specifically authorize you to personally destroy property at dawn? I asked, still recording. Because that seems like an unusual board decision. She didn't answer. This will all be sorted out at the next board meeting. You're still in violation and accumulating fines. She started walking away, leaving the crowbar and damaged mailbox on my lawn. I'm calling the postal inspector and the police to report this. I called out after her. And I'll be sending them this video. She practically jogged to her car, parked a block away. Several neighbors approached me as Margaret drove off, offering support and sharing their own stories about her tyrannical rule. She fined me for having the wrong shade of beige curtains visible from the street, Mrs. Chin said, shaking her head. She measured the height of my grass with a ruler and fined me because it was half an inch too tall, added Mr. Rodriguez from down the street. True to my word, I called the police to report the vandalism and contacted the postal inspector's office, emailing them the video of Margaret destroying my mailbox. I also set up a security camera to cover my front yard. The police took my report, and the officer seemed amused but took it seriously. We've had HOA disputes before, but this is a new one, he admitted. She really crossed a line. By that afternoon, I had installed the new black standard mailbox I'd ordered, exactly the kind specified in the HOA guidelines. I figured compliance would strengthen my position. The next day, I received a call from the postal inspector's office. Inspector James Ramirez arrived to take photos and get a formal statement. After examining the damaged mailbox and reviewing my video, he explained they were taking the case quite seriously. Mailbox vandalism might seem minor to some, but it's a federal crime for good reason, he explained. When people start tampering with mailboxes, it undermines mail security, which is essential for privacy and identity protection. That evening, I received an emergency HOA email notification. There would be a special board meeting the following night to discuss recent community incidents. All homeowners were encouraged to attend. The community clubhouse was packed to capacity. The 5 HOA board members, including Margaret, sat at a table facing the residents. Margaret looked considerably less confident than usual, her typically perfect appearance slightly disheveled. The vice president, a man named Robert, opened the meeting. Before we address regular agenda items, we need to discuss a serious matter. It has been alleged that an action was taken against a resident's property without proper authorization from the full board. Murmurs spread through the room. Margaret stared straight ahead, her expression stony. The board wants to make it clear that while we are committed to maintaining community standards, we do not condone illegal actions or property destruction, Robert continued. All enforcement must follow proper procedures. Another board member, Janet, spoke up. To be transparent, the board did vote to address the non-compliant mailbox, but our resolution was to proceed with legal notification of intent to place a lien on the property. At no point did we authorize physical removal or destruction of the mailbox. All eyes turned to Margaret. I acted in what I believed were the best interests of our community, she said stiffly. The noncompliance was ongoing, and more direct action seemed necessary. Direct action at 6:15 in the morning, someone called from the audience, prompting laughter. Robert cleared his throat. The board has received notification that both local police and federal postal inspectors are investigating this incident. This puts the HOA in a potentially liable position. I raised my hand and was recognized to speak. I want to make it clear that my issue isn't with the HOA rules themselves. I've already installed a compliant mailbox. My issue is with Ms. Whitaker's approach, which escalated from excessive fines to property destruction. Several residents applauded. Other homeowners stood to share their experiences with Margaret's overzealous enforcement. It seemed she had been targeting certain residents while ignoring violations by her friends and assessing fines without proper board approval. As the testimonies continued, Margaret's face grew increasingly flushed. Finally, she stood abruptly. This is a coordinated attack on my character. I have devoted years to maintaining the standards of this community. She gathered her papers and stormed toward the exit. You'll regret this when property values plummet because of noncompliance. After she left, the board announced they would audit all fines assessed in the past year. Pending the results of that audit and the ongoing investigations, Margaret had been temporarily relieved of her duties as president. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to heal. The board implemented new policies to ensure transparency and fairness, and residents felt more empowered to voice their concerns without fear of retaliation. As for Margaret, she eventually resigned from the HOA board and moved out of Oak Ridge Estates. Rumor had it she found a new neighborhood to improve, but I couldn't say for sure. All I knew was that peace had finally returned to my little corner of the world. And as for my mailbox, it's still standing, black, standard, and completely compliant. But every time I walk past it, I can't help but smile, remembering the day I stood up to the tyranny of Margaret Whitaker and won. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.